I am so happy to be joined by Dr. Jay Russell, Dr. Benjamin Powers, Dr. Maureen Lovett, all from the Haskins Global Literacy Hub. The reason we're here is because of the crisis COVID-19 has caused to education for the 2020-2021 school year. I've had the pleasure to work with Dr. Jay Russell on reading education for the last number of years. And during this crisis, he and I, along with Dr. Benjamin Powers and Dr. Maureen Lovett, wanted to bring together parents, teachers, students, and educators on how the Haskins Global Literacy Hub Resource Library can provide free resources to parents and teachers who want to help their sons and daughters during this very difficult learning year. As someone who struggled to learn how to read when I was a young person, I know how important early childhood education is and how critical early years are into developing that reading brain. If I was not diagnosed with dyslexia at 6, I would not be the person I am today because I would not have had parents and educators who were able to make sure that I received the proper education. So I'm so happy to bring these experts here today to show us what they're doing at the Haskins Global Literacy Hub and to introduce Dr. Jay Russell. Jay?
Thanks, Bobby. It's welcome to everyone to tonight's webinar. I'm Jay Russell. I'm Associate Director of the Haskins Global Literacy Hub and a Special Advisor to the Windward Institute, which is a division of the Windward School, which has campuses in Manhattan and in Westchester County. I'd like to offer a special thanks to New York State Assembly member Bobby Carroll for initiating and organizing this webinar for New York City parents and educators. But I'd also like to just expand on that because Bobby has done so much more than just organize this particular webinar. As he mentioned in his opening remarks, Bobby and I have worked together for a number of years, and I want everybody on this webinar to know that he is a staunch advocate for students in New York City public schools and independent schools. He has been a leader in bringing legislation to the fore that would help all of our students. So we're indebted to you, Bobby, for all the work you've done. So thank you. Let me begin with a brief introduction to the Hub. The Haskins Global Literacy Hub is part of the Haskins Laboratory, which are affiliated with Yale University and the University of Connecticut, and are located on Yale's campuses in New Haven. The Hub is an international, interdisciplinary partnership of expert researchers, practitioners, educators, and education technology specialists from around the globe. They come together to solve one of the most critical issues preventing people from escaping poverty, leading healthy and productive lives, and achieving their full potential. Simply put, the mission of the Hub is to improve language and literacy outcomes for all children across languages, cultures, and continents. To accomplish its mission, the Hub supports ongoing and active outreach to the broader educational community by providing resources that are based on scientifically validated research in child development, learning theory, and pedagogy. Tonight's webinar is one that the Hub is making available to support students and families during this time of school closures due to COVID-19. I've spent 47 years as a teacher, principal, superintendent, and head of school in the New York metropolitan area, including in New York City. And I have to tell you, I have never experienced the challenges that educators and students are facing today with this prolonged absence from their physical classrooms. Members of the Hub recognize this challenge and have been able to gather scientifically validated resources from researchers and educators across the country that are now residing on the Haskins Global Literacy Hub. Tonight, we'll be demonstrating how to access and use over 350 free research-based resources that parents can use at home with their children. This evening, we're delighted to present Building a Reading Brain at Home with expert tips and free resources during COVID-19. We're most fortunate to have Dr. Ben Powers and Dr. Maureen Lovett as our presenters for tonight's webinar. Given the large audience for this webinar, we ask that questions be submitted using the Q&A feature on Zoom that's on the bottom of your screen. Dr. Powers and Dr. Lovett will answer as many questions as possible and will be joined by Assemblyman we'll be joined by the Assemblyman and myself at the end of the presentation. A copy of the presentation slide will also be, from this webinar, will also be mailed to all the attendees. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our distinguished presenters. Dr. Ben Powers is the director of the Haskins Global Literacy Hub and an affiliate research scientist at Haskins. He is also head of the Southport School in Southport, Connecticut, and founder of the Southport CoLab. Dr. Powers is a practitioner, researcher, and advocate who develops opportunities to integrate research and practice for children and adults with reading difficulties and attentional issues. He works to build collaborative community partnerships to close the literacy gap and support the needs of diverse learners while focusing on the importance of developing sustainable platforms of opportunity through social entrepreneurship. Dr. Maureen Lovett is an associate director of the Haskins Global Literacy Hub. She is a senior scientist emerita in the neurosciences and mental health program of Toronto's Hospital for Sick Children and a professor emerita on pediatrics and medical sciences at the University of Toronto. She has contributed to learning disabilities research and practice for the past 40 years and is known internationally for her research on interventions for children and youth who struggle to read. And now it's my pleasure to turn the program over to Dr. Powers. Ben, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Dr. Russell, for that kind introduction. And again, we would really like to thank Assemblyman Carroll for presenting this opportunity to share these free resources with you tonight. So with that in mind, both Dr. Lovett and Jay are part of the Haskins Global Literacy Hub, and we are representing a huge contingency, people from 6 continents, leaders and experts in literacy development, in research, and practitioners and educators from across the globe. So we appreciate you being here with us tonight, but we are representing a much larger body of people with a lot of work ahead of them to really help provide resources to provide effective literacy instruction for children. So Dr. Russell overviewed the Haskins Global Literacy Hub, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But in a nutshell, we basically have 3 core objectives. Number 1, it's to improve our knowledge of language and literacy development. And we do that through identifying opportunities for research through partnership in the hub. So we find and identify important questions that we want to research, and we apply Haskins's nearly 90 years of leading edge research in spoken and written language to do that. The second important part of the hub is that we work to bridge practitioners and educators with researchers. So there is bi-directional communication so that researchers who spend a lot of time in the lab, in fact, I'm actually at Haskins right now, researchers who spend a lot of time in the lab don't often get a chance to engage with educators and people in classrooms, and vice versa. Educators and people, professionals in the classroom don't often get a chance to engage with researchers. And so by facilitating that communication, we can really move the research agenda forward and provide opportunities for translational research. And the third part of the Haskins Global Literacy Hub is to provide access to research-based practices. And that's what we're here to share with you tonight. All of the things we're going to share tonight, and in fact, all of the things on the Haskins Global Literacy Hub's website are free. So if you go to haskinsglobal.org, that's the home of our website, all of our resources are free, and they've been vetted by professionals, expert researchers in the field of spoken and written language. So what are some of these resources? So some examples are the resource library, and that's actually what my colleague, Dr. Lovett, is going to discuss in just a little bit. It's a huge collection of free resources that parents and educators can use that are all grounded in evidence and research. Another example would be a curated book list. This is actually a project we're almost finished, almost completed. And really it's to provide a selection of loved books by people at Haskins as a jumping off point, a starting point for, again, in the classroom or at home for ideas, suggestions of books that you might want to read with your child. It's actually a beautiful interface, and we're so excited to see that go live, and it's going to go live in the next several weeks. The third project that we have been working on is called Rescue for Families, and that's actually something I'm going to talk about in just a minute. But Rescue for Families was developed out of a National Science Foundation, NSF grant that two Haskins colleagues, Dr. Ken Pugh and Dr. Fumiko Huft, developed for during COVID. So basically their project is to research the impact that COVID is having on learning in children in school. So because they haven't been in school, you know, what's the impact of that on literacy development? So they're researching what is called COVID slide. It's similar to what, if you've ever heard of the term summer slide, it's the compounded effect of students being out of school because of COVID. So they're researching that. To research that question, they're using a game called GraphoGame, and that's actually what I'm gonna overview in just a minute. But this game has been developed from research, and so this project that Dr. Pugh and Dr. Heft have developed with the NSF grant, we are leveraging that to be able to share that same game with families at home. And another example of a resource that we provide is Ask a Brain Scientist. This is actually really fun, and you can actually sign up for this online. It's actually for your child, but you can register your child, and there's a schedule of live webinars that are hosted by a Haskins research scientist to cover some of the science of the reading brain, which is what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. So really quickly, to navigate to some of these free resources, all you need to do is go to haskinsglobal.org, and on the top bar, the third column over, you'll see resources. And when you click on resources, you'll see the top two are the resource library that Dr. Lovett will talk about soon, and then Rescue for Families. There's some information there about what I'm going to talk about in a moment. But these are the two resources that we're going to highlight tonight. But there are a wealth of resources. And in fact, even what we have to share with you tonight is just the tip of the iceberg for what we have on the website. So we're going to focus on these two tonight. But before we do that, it's really important to spend a moment on the building blocks for a reading brain. So this is actually from the National Reading Panel, which was convened in 2000. And they developed a report from that National Reading Panel. And as part of the National Reading Panel, they identified 5 key elements for building a reading brain. Number 1 is phonemic awareness. And a simple way to think about phonemic awareness is that it's the individual sounds in words. So for example, if you hear the word cat, it's comprised of k, a, t. So there are 3 phonemes in that word. So those are the discriminating those little sounds, the individual sounds in each word. The second important pillar is phonics. And so a simple way to think about phonics, there's a lot of talk about phonics. It's one important element. It's not the only element of developing a reading brain, but it is an important element. And a simple way to think about phonics is that those phonemes we just talked about, those individual sounds, it's linking those to letters. So we call the sounds phonemes and we call the letters graphemes. So it's linking those two together. And that's what phonics is all about, making those connections. The third important aspect of building a reading brain is fluency. So fluency is a combination of rate and accuracy. So when we're teaching a child to read, or when we're reading as we grow older, it's really important to be accurate so that we are actually reading the correct words that are on the page. And as we continue to develop with our reading skills, it's also important to develop a faster rate of reading so that we can be more efficient readers. So that's what fluency is, a combination of rate and accuracy. The fourth important pillar is vocabulary. And so we're talking about both oral vocabulary that we hear in speech and written vocabulary that children or adults will pick up through print. And of course, the last building block of a reading brain is the whole goal of reading, which is comprehension, just the ability to understand what we are reading. So these are 5 core aspects, and these are actually woven through a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight. So, Rescue for Families. As we look at these building blocks for a reading brain, this part of the Haskins Global Literacy Hub, this resource from us, this covers really two parts of building a reading brain. It focuses really on phonemic awareness, those individual sounds, and phonics, linking those two together. It does a few other things, but those are the two core aspects of what GraphoGame is all about. So what is this GraphoGame? It is an app that is freely downloadable on the Apple App Store, on the Microsoft App Store, and on the Android App Store. And the Android App Store, the version that is up there for GraphoGame is also, it can also be downloaded and used on Chromebooks, which we know a ton of kids have right now, especially from COVID. So all three platforms, the app is available for free. And we were able to come to this arrangement because of that NSF grant that our colleagues are working on with GraphoGame. As part of that, we found a way to be able to provide this free to anybody in the United States all the way through March 2021. So it's free to download all the way through March 2021, although we would encourage you to download it sooner rather than later. And once it's no longer free to download, the license that you have to use it is free in perpetuity. It's free forever. There's no cost involved. It's just that after March, if somebody was to try to download it, there would be a charge, whatever GraphoGame, whatever the company charges for it. So, but you can download this, tonight, tomorrow, for free from any of those app stores. And this was developed, this app, and the reason it's focused on in this NSF grant and why we're providing it to families, it's got a near 20-year history of development, and it has been researched in multiple languages. So some Haskins colleagues at Jyväskylä University in Finland developed this app to really focus on those early building blocks of the reading brain. And again, it's been translated in multiple languages. And it covers all the way up from, children as young as 4 or 5 can use it, all the way up to the end of elementary school and even the beginning of middle school. I have 4 kids, and my youngest is 5 and my oldest is 12, and all of my kids use this in the house. So it does span quite a bit of age range. And this is something that your children can do independently for the most part, but research has shown that it is beneficial if an adult is kind of in the zone, so that you're helping your child find the time and the space to do it. It's recommended that a child spend about 15 minutes a day playing GraphoGame. It's actually really fun. I'm going to show you some clips in just a minute. But as the adult, just helping your child find the space and the kind of the quiet space to do that and make sure they're focused on the app for those 15 minutes or so. So it's been shown to be more beneficial if there's a parent in the household or a guardian in the household who can do that. So let's take a look and see what this is like. So this is really the first screen. As soon as you load the app and you click to get started, this is what the first screen looks like. And all you need to do is click on this plus sign down here, and you can create your own character. And I'm going to create one for my son, Chase, whose name I had trouble spelling just for a second there. I forgot the C, but here we go, Chase. And once you create that, there are 2 player modes. There's the paper map mode, and then there's a stars mode. But as you develop your character, you can, make your avatar, change the hair color, skin color, clothes color, anything you want. But you can see there are 2 different versions. There's the paper map and the stars version. This is the paper map version I'm about to show you. Both versions show you the same exact content. It's just presented a little differently based on the age of the user.
Let's play with the sounds it, t, p, n, a, s, k. When you hear the sound, see if you can catch the correct letter.
Climb the correct ladder.
So here what I'd be doing on my iPhone or my iPad is listening to the sound, and then all I need to do with my finger is point or touch the correct letter, the correct sound. And each time I do that, my player, in this case it's a little ghost, makes its way up this staircase. You can see I got one wrong, just to show you what that looks like.
I, n, n, s, a, t, p, I, A, I, K, T, P, N.
So I let this play through all the way to the end of this level here, just so you can get a sense. If you notice when I made a mistake, what happened was the game presented me again with a choice, but only one choice, just to make sure we reinforce the right sound symbol relationship. And so if we were live, I'd be asking you to tell me what just happened. But this is the example of the phonemes and graphemes and making links between those. So if you see, the other piece I wanted to show you here is that I earned 40 of these silver coins, and 100 of them makes a gold coin. And part of the whole ecosystem of this game, which is something that we know kids love, is that there's an opportunity to shop for a variety of things after you get to certain points in the game. So this is an example of some beginner level content on Grapple Game. Here is another example.
Now we're going to put another sound in front of the rhyme units you've just played with. This will make a longer word. Watch how this is done.
S, it, s, it,
So you can see it gives the
Sit.
backdrop for linking the sounds together. And now what it'll do,
at, p, at,
is
cat,
provide the game. And here you can see, again, it's just a
Hit.
different, there are multiple types of games
Sit.
in here. This is the balloon game, there's the ladder
Hit.
game, there's a game underwater, there's a game with a frog. So there's a variety of
Knit.
different components that keep
Hit.
kids engaged.
Now we're going to put another sound in.
So here's a little bit of more advanced content. This time I'm switching to myself. I had to actually play through all these games. So here it'll give you a chance to see some of the kind of more complex content. Now, very quickly, you can see I'm scrolling through. As I mentioned, there's two parts of the game. There's the map version and the star version. The map version is your child would kind of traverse a big map and just be pointed to individual activities, one next after the other. And in the star version, it's a little more, it's kind of a little more adult for the kids, or not adult, but a little more sophisticated. So it's designed so that it can kind of keep a child's interest a little bit later. But you can see these are all the different levels. And so you can see it's kind of streaming through these different levels, but it gives you a sense of some of the depth of content in the game, because there is quite a bit of content in here. And if I was playing this game, what would happen is I'd pick one of those activities.
These words also contain the I sound and belong to the IT rhyme family. One way of making this rhyme unit is with the letters IGHT.
So again, this is providing some backdrop
Oh.
on the kind of long vowel spellings, long vowel I.
O, IT, light, light. O, I, T. O, I, T. Light, light.
Here's the frog game.
Right,
So you go through the level. So again, it's supposed to be fun, engaging for the kids. And there are also assessments as you go through for these older kids in the star level. And so when they reach the end of a certain chunk or a certain segment, what happens is
ox,
you pick an assessment and you have to get through all three assessments.
in,
But the assessments are cumulative. So it's doing some
So.
basic things. I'm actually at a much harder level,
arm,
but it's providing some review and reinforcement of some earlier
Eat.
learned concepts. And then it's going all the way up through more
3.
challenging words.
stage, deal, skirt, bloat, reach,
And then here's the map version again. This just gives you an example of the ecosystem, the store that kids can go in. So you can see, this is my daughter Zoe. She's gonna go look at her animal kingdom here. She's got a whole animal kingdom. You can move these animals around. You can buy animals in in the store. You can buy you can buy things like hair dye. Actually, believe it or not, there's a whole bunch of things that you can change the avatar of your character. Here, she's going to go to the store to buy some hair dye. So as you can see, there's just a tremendous amount of content that the game covers, and it's done in a way that, again, is very similar to a lot of games kids are playing already. So there's a familiar feeling there, and it provides, again, really with just 15 minutes a day, a really great opportunity to reinforce very early literacy skills. So again, this is Graphogame. It's available for free through March 31st, 2021 in the iOS, the Microsoft, and the Android app stores. And again, it's just a great way to have your child reinforce some skills at home. So with that, I am going to give you my colleague, Dr. Maureen Lovett, who is going to talk about the amazing Haskins Global Literacy Hub Resource Library.
Thank you, Dr. Powers, and thank you to Dr. Russell for his kind introduction. And thank you most of all to Assemblyman Carroll for bringing us together tonight. We're all very delighted to be here with you and looking forward to hearing your questions and your feedback about some of the projects we've been working on with Haskins Global Literacy Hub through this COVID-19 shutdown of schools and resources. I just want to start by putting all this Building a Reading Brain title into context. Learning to read is a huge event and milestone in your child's life. And it takes many years of learning before a child becomes a skilled reader. But along this journey, your child's brain undergoes a massive transformation. When your child learns to speak and to understand spoken language, a whole language network or circuitry for understanding and using language develops in your child's brain. When your child comes to reading instruction, and if they have a good foundation of oral language development, the circuitry for becoming a reader becomes overlaid on that speech and language circuitry. So these are very, very important aspects of development in your child's life. So we want to stress that to build a reading brain, and that's what we're talking about, you need to build a very strong foundation. And the foundation for reading is found in your child's speech and language development. Oral language development provides many of the building blocks. Now, when you come to our resource library, you will start, or you will be greeted, if this is your first visit, and given an option of following a little tutorial that's there. The tutorial is really designed to help you learn how to use the resource library. First, you'll have the opportunity, if you'd like, to watch a very accessible 6 to 7 minute video clip by Dr. Marianne Wolf, our colleague in building this in the Global Literacy Hub. And she explains to you why it is we made this library and why we structured it the way we did. Then you'll be guided to take a very short questionnaire that you'll find to the right of the page, and it is used to guide you to a section within the resource library according to your child's age and their level of reading development. It helps you find the category where you might find the most appropriate resources for your child. This is not prescribed, however, and you are always free to explore to your heart's content and find what's a good match for what you'd like your child to be working on and what might be most engaging to your child. At first glance, it might seem as if the categories, the sections, and the subsections of the resource library are unnecessarily detailed. And maybe, in fact, they are, and you might advise us to do some pruning. But there was a logic behind the structure. The categories and the sections and the subsections follow the developmental stages a child and a young person goes through as they become a reader and become more skilled. And these different sections and subsections build upon one another. So the questionnaire that we provide will guide you to a particular section in the library. And whenever you come to a section, a new page will open when you click on the subsection you're interested in. And this page will provide a whole list of resources that we've curated and linked you to work in that area of reading development. You can also use a search bar to find a specific resource. You can type a keyword and see if a section has a specific resource. And last but not least, if you're not sure where to start, we have 4 quick start guides that describe different sections, and you can see whether or not they're appropriate for you and your child. This is our quick start page for early childhood, and we have one for each of the developmental levels in the resource library. There are 4 general developmental levels we cover in becoming a reader. One is early childhood, and that's where I'll start by showing you a resource. And in a quick start guide, we tell you what we mean by that term, what the science says is really important to teach the child at that level, and we give you an example of some activities you might want to start with. So we start with early childhood. We then move to early readers. The 3rd section are developing readers. And in the 4th section, we have more advanced readers. So actually the material in our resource library goes all the way from infancy up into adolescence and young adulthood. So we try to have something for everyone here. If your child is under 5, you start off in the early childhood section. So these are infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. And we know that high quality activities are very important for developing foundational skills at this age. Now, as a parent, you might say, what can I do given all the other things I'm responsible in my life for, and given all the obstacles that these lockdowns and restrictions have brought to my life? Well, as a parent, you can just do more of what you're already doing, I'm sure. Talking, a blue streak with your child and to your child. Reading from whatever material you can find to your child, and really delighting in the process of sitting and looking at a book together. And finally, when the musical spirit moves you, singing to your child and letting them enjoy the cadence and the structure of music. In the resource library, materials are under 2 main sections. One large section is for talking, and a second is for reading and read alouds with your child. So I've picked an example here. you would look under the read part of the early childhood resources, and you might come to shared book reading and decide you'd like to see what's there. And under there, you can click on preschool read alouds. And this is a wonderful set of resources that we have to thank Dr. Powers for, because the Southport CoLab that he founded provides these resources. Here you'll see there are many different topics you can select according to your interests and your baby's interests. Here I've picked fables and fairy tales, and you see we have a choice amongst Goldilocks, Three Little Pigs, Billy Goat's Gruff, and you can pick your book, and you'll also have a lesson activity that is a follow-up to your book. If your child is 5 and over and has started a process of reading instruction, then you may, if they're at the very beginning of this process, you'll probably look in our early readers section. Now, remember, thinking back to Dr. Powers' presentation of the 5 pillars of reading development, in this part of a child's reading development, there are 2 milestones that are particularly important for them to achieve. One is they really need to understand that spoken words are made up of individual sounds. The k, at, that Dr. Powers illustrated when he was talking about phonemic awareness. The second milestone he talked about when he talked about phonics. They need to understand that words are made up of letters and their associated sounds. And there are a lot of activities you can use to facilitate development in this area that are really fun for beginning readers. Under the resource library early readers category, if you want to work on decoding and learning some of the building blocks of reading, you'll probably look under the letters and word parts first. You can select sounds inside words, then pick beginning sounds, and you'll find a fun activity called sound shopping that's developed by our colleagues from PALS at the University of Virginia. This resource provides you with all the materials you need, and you need only 2 things to play this game, and you can make adaptations as you go along and augment it. You will need some picture cards, and you'll need some plain brown paper bags. And on the brown paper bags, you need to print a beginning letter. You will get the picture sounds from the resource online. You just need to print them, and then your child maybe can cut them out for you. What will happen is that your child will be given a bag or a couple of bags with a single letter on it, and you'll tell them to go shopping and only buy items that begin with the same letter as you've written on their bag. The child will look through the picture cards on the table. They'll make the sound of the letter that's illustrated on their bag, and they'll have to isolate the beginning sound of every letter they see. D as in dog, as in elephant, f as in fish, g as in goat. There are picture cards for every sound in the alphabet. After placing the correct pictures in the bag, your child will then tell you what they bought with that letter. A very simple game, and it can be expanded. Another game you can play with early readers is developed by our friends at the Florida Center for Reading Research. And there are many excellent resources from their center that we've included in our resource library. Here you will look under beginnings and endings of longer words within the letters and word parts section. And you'll look at the morpheme structure section. And I know this is a mouthful, but your child doesn't have to learn it. Variant correspondences, and specifically the vowel slide game. In this video clip, Dr. Powers and his very adept student, Miss Lauren, illustrate how to play this game.
Okay, so on the FCRR website, you can download the individual vowel slide sheets, and you can see these are the pieces that you can cut out. And when you cut them out, they look just like this. And I'm going to give it to Miss Lauren so she can demonstrate how to use the vowel slide.
All right, so basically I have 2 strips here, and I'm going to slide them one at a time to see if they make a word. So D-A-R-T, D-R-T, dart. And now if that's a word, I would write it down, and it is a word, so I'm writing it down.
Good job, Miss Lauren.
Thank you.
All right, so let's slide the next one. So the next consonant down is M. There we go. So this is fun because it's a nice thing for the kids to be able to actually manipulate themselves and then be able to be engaged with.
Great, so I still have the D, so I go D-R-M, darm, and that's not a word, so I'm not going to.
Are you sure that's not a word? Oh, no, it's
No,
not.
it's not, it's not a
Okay.
word.
Another activity available within the syllable pattern section is called Syllable Patterns, Picture It in Syllables, also by FCRR. And again, Dr. Powers and Miss Lauren show us how it's done.
Okay, our next free resource comes from our friends at FCRR, and it's a syllable matching game. So you download the instructions, and you can see that there's a list of pictures and lines next to them, and then there are different syllables that you can actually have your child cut out. So this is what the syllable cutouts look like, and Miss Lauren has them all laid out on the desk, and her job now is to see, as she picks up the syllable cards, to see if she can make a word that matches with the picture.
So your child or your student will pick up 2 cards, and if they match and they make a word, they'll try to find it on the picture. So for example, munket, munket. Well, that's not a word, so I'm going to put it back down. And then I could try again, and I can say, oh, I want to keep up with this mun, and then add this, monkey, monkey. Oh, that's a word. So I'm going to lay them down in front of me. I'm going to look on my paper and see if I can find a monkey, which I do. And I'm going to use my syllable cards to write the word.
Nicely done. Well, you can see we have a lot of materials for early readers. In the next section, developing readers are those children and young people who have mastered some of the basics and can read a fair number of words by themselves, but only if they are simpler spelling pattern words. They might have trouble on multisyllabic words like vacation or exception, or words that have more complicated vowel patterns and letter sound correspondences. Many aspects of the reading system are developing full steam right now. The kids are learning to decode more complicated multisyllabic words. They're able to read a variety of text material, and they're expanding their knowledge of the world by reading. In the developing readers section, under the oral language and reading comprehension section, we have a subsection, deepening comprehension, that has some resources developed by the Meadow Center. And one of them is, Does It Make Sense? Again, Dr. Powers and Lauren illustrate how it's done.
So another free resource comes from our friends at the Meadow Center, and it's called does it make sense? And this is an oral language comprehension activity. So depending on how well a child reads, you would give them this sheet and you would either read it to them or they can read it themselves. And the objective is for them to figure out if the sentence makes sense. So Miss Lauren, what happens if the sentence makes sense?
So if the sentence makes sense, the child simply answers by circling yes in the yes or no area. If it doesn't make sense, they're going to answer no, but then they need to underline the part of the sentence that doesn't make sense. So Dr. Powers just showed the teacher or the parent version, which has the answers, so you don't have to worry about knowing the right answers here. And then the student version does not show the answers. And so depending on the level of reading that the student is able to do on their own, you can either have them read it or you can read it to them. So for example, the first one says there are millions of stars in the ocean. And I would have to, as the student, decide if that makes sense. There are millions of stars in the ocean. No, that doesn't make sense. I circle no. And then why doesn't it make sense? Because there's no stars in the ocean. So I'm going to underline this part that says ocean. You can see it like that. And then Dr. Powers can check if I'm right by looking at his answer key.
That's right. Well done, Miss Lauren.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, you could also be flexible depending on the student's answer. So for example, if the student said the word stars is incorrect and that there are millions of fish in the ocean, there are probably billions and billions, but use your judgment with this type of activity to encourage and support your child.
Most of the activities that you'll find in our resource library are sets of activities or single activities, but there are also a few cases where whole programs have been embedded in the library because the designers have given access to them free of charge online during the COVID shutdown and crisis. An example also within the developing readers level, found in oral language and reading comprehension, and again within the big subsection of deepening comprehension, is something called Word Generation Elementary. There's a whole program available geared towards a 4th grade level and one available at the 5th grade level. At both levels, these include 12 two-week units of daily lessons, and the units are all built around a central topic that's selected to be really relevant and good for kids to think about and discuss at this level. So among the grade 4 topics are things like, what is fair? Who should decide what we eat? Should everyone learn a second language? Who gets to decide what's safe? In grade 5, kids work on, where do I belong? What divides us and how can we resolve differences? Why do we fight? Now, we have in this little video clip a quick scroll through some of the extensive materials available within the Word Gen project. And you can see again some of the topics. Should wild animals be adopted as pets? You get to see how the days are structured with different activities. Action News, there are several newscasters, including Page Reader and Justin Time, who introduce a topic. There's Readers Theater, where different characters give their perspectives on topics of the week. And there are discussion points where kids turn and talk with each other, or if you're doing this alone at home, then you need to be your child's partner for some of this discussion. Characters have different perspectives on the topic, and kids engage in activities that require them to discern a character's perspective and to be able to articulate it in the writing section of this. So really engaging higher level reading and reading comprehension and writing activities for our developing readers here. Now, if your child is ready for even more challenging material, then you should look in our fourth and final category, which is designed for more advanced readers. These young people are often in their middle or their high school years. Many of them have the building blocks of literacy, but some of them may still have enduring problems at some level of reading, of building the reading system. But that's fine. There's nothing to prevent you and your reader from going back and sampling some of the activities that can help bolster up any skill gaps that remain there. Many of the students are working on building fluency, expanding their vocabularies, deepening their comprehension of more complicated text materials, and they're working quite hard to develop their skills as writers, an important aspect of literacy. Now, one of the activities used in this section that you'll find under deepening comprehension for your more advanced readers is a simple 3-page handout for parents called How Do I Engage in Partner Reading with My Child? And it's really well suited for our circumstances in COVID-19 shutdown. Partner reading is very simply two people taking turns reading a short, interesting article out loud and stopping every couple of paragraphs to discuss good comprehension questions based on the text. And the parent goes first and models how this is done. Now, our friends at the Meadow Center, who have developed this and many other resources for adolescent and middle school reading, provide a sample text. This text is entitled, This Study Should Move You Towards a Healthier and Longer Life. And you see the parent starts reading the first section, then they give an example of what would be a good text-based discussion there. The child reaches the next section. So this is an activity that you can do using many different texts on many different topics, all building up important comprehension skills for your child. But we caution you, if you're going to do partner reading, be careful that you don't pick reading texts that are so difficult that they're going to frustrate your child. It's okay if they don't know all the words, but they should know the majority, and it should be material that they are able to read. Now, also in the more advanced readers section, the people at SERP, the Strategic Education Research Partnership, have made available online for free during COVID shutdowns a wonderful array of reading materials and packets in a whole program called Strategic Adolescent Reading Intervention, or STARI. Here you see reading packets built around novels and short stories and sometimes poetry on topics that are really relevant to young people. Now, STARI, this gives you a quick scroll down some of the materials. This is guided reading around a book called The Skin I'm In, and you can see some of the comprehension questions posed to the child. There's partner reading, there's guided reading. STARry is a program for adolescent struggling readers, adolescents who are reading maybe at least 2 years behind their grade level. And so it has some work on some of the foundational skills. They don't have a full decoding program, but they do have support for kids who are still struggling to read individual words. They also build comprehension, deeper comprehension of complex texts. They build up perspective taking and critical reading, and a lot of elements of reading comprehension that are very important. Now, in addition, as Dr. Powers mentioned, in addition to our resource library, which is up live, we are working very hard to get our curated book list up and available to you. And this is simply a set of book titles for each developmental level: early childhood, early readers, developing readers, and more advanced readers. And all of the books we select have been looked at and suggested by literacy experts within the Global Literacy Hub, but they've all been checked very carefully to make sure that they're available without charge from your local library. We start with some of my favorite early childhood ones. A personal favorite of mine is Moo Ba La La La, which is a wonderful book about animal sounds that you can read to your babies, up to Cars and Trucks and Things That Go for your active toddler, remembering that it is absolutely never too early to start reading to your child. And the sooner they start having fun with books, the more they'll be bringing to reading instruction. We have books that we're suggesting for early readers and developing readers, but also in our more advanced reader section, we have materials like the young adult version of Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime, the famous Howells book, Malala's story. And on every book cover that's illustrated, there's the author is listed and also a very short synopsis. So we ask your patience and ask you to stay tuned for this addition to the resource library that we hope will be useful. Please stay tuned and be patient. But we also want you to know that, again, the resource library is a living repository. It's a work in progress. It will undergo additions and refinements and editing. And we so welcome your comments and your questions. So please feel free to send your comments and your questions to us on the Haskins Global Literacy Hub email that's provided at the bottom of the resource library. Thank you very much for plowing through this with me.
Thank you, Maureen, Dr. Powers, Mr. Assemblyman Carroll. We have a number of questions from our audience that I'd like to see if we can get through most of them, time permitting. So let me begin with the first question. And I think, Maureen, you might be the perfect person to answer this first question. Can phonological memory be improved? If so, what supports this?
I'm not sure I'm the expert for this question, but I would say that building phonological skills and essentially building up the circuitry in that aspect of the brain that really is an interaction between the reading circuits and the speech and language circuits of the brain. As you build up that code and representations become more automatic, I would say that probably your reader would find phonological memory to be somewhat facilitated by that.
And Ben, I know you've done a lot of work with phonological memory. Do you have anything else to add to that?
Well, I think, Maureen gave a good overview there. I think, one of the confusing things about phonological memory, it's part of working memory, and working memory is sometimes misunderstood. A good way to think about working memory is that it's just like the RAM in your computer. So you can have a huge hard drive, be able to store tons of data, tons of files, but the RAM, if you've ever had a kind of a computer shut down on you, or the spinning wheel of death on your Mac, the RAM is the ability to hold on to and manipulate information simultaneously. And so, as Dr. Lovett mentioned, the better level of automaticity we get. And this is part of why these early parts of the building blocks, like phonemic awareness and phonological, the things that stimulate phonological awareness and provide practice for processing phonemes, and linking those sounds with the letters, and then stringing those together to the words. The more automatic we can become with those, the better chance we have of improving the outcomes for literacy.
And I mean, the demonstration you gave and the research behind GraphoGame supports both those positions. And speaking of GraphoGame, we have a couple of kind of nuts and bolts questions about GraphoGame that perhaps you can answer. Is GraphoGame free in Canada also?
Well, we would love to have it free in Canada, but right now, no, it's not free. Just very quickly, the GraphoGame was developed at the university level, and it's put into the app stores through a separate company, and so there's usually a fee for that. It's usually between $5 to $10 depending on the location. It is currently freely available in multiple countries. It's available for free in France and the United States, and several countries in Central and South America. However, right now it's not, and I know Dr. Lovett would like it to see that happen, but no, it's free in the United States right now, as kind of an adjacent project to that rescue research project that Dr. Pugh and Dr. Hefter are doing.
And there was a little bit of confusion about if you go to the GraphoGame website on one of the sites, it seems to have a price tag associated with it of, what was it, $8.95? $8.99, and we're saying that it's free right now, right? And to do that, you have to click on GraphoGame, learn to read American English in the App Store. Is that the very specific
That
direction?
is correct. There are several English versions. There's actually UK English, there is American English, and so that's correct. You can either search right in your App Store, GraphoGame US, as soon as you type that in, it should pop up, or you can just go right to the Haskins Global website, and under the resources column, you can click on Rescue for Families, and that will take you to the landing page to click on from there.
Right, and I know, Bobby, you wanted to emphasize that all of these resources and more, this is just a small, very small sampling of the total amount, are available on the Haskins resource page. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Bobby?
Well, sure, Jay, and I just wanted to highlight, and Maureen, right, all the games that you highlighted from FCRR and Meadows also can be reached through the Haskins Literacy Hub, right?
Absolutely. They're all gathered together there for parents and for teachers. Now it will direct you to their original repository on the original FCRR and Meadows Center sites, but the links to them are all within the library.
And our purpose tonight was not to do an exhaustive rundown of all the resources. Hopefully we did accomplish our task, which was to familiarize parents and educators. Teachers can use this material too, and tutors, so that you'll be able to move through the website and through the resource library a little bit more easily. So we hope we accomplished that. Going back to the Grapho game, we had a question which you may want to talk a little bit more about. Does Grapho game address multisyllabic words?
Yeah, actually it does. And I have a very short clip here, Dr. Russell, that I could just share with people very quickly, just to give an example of what that looks like, if that's helpful. So this is yet another game in the Grapho game, but when we come up to...
Now you will hear a word. Look at the boxes with the bits of words. See if you can spell the word in the right order by clicking on the boxes. Care. Repair. Welfare. Join. Voice. Soil.
So there's a variety of content in there, and although not nearly as robust as the number of resources in the resource library, there are close to 30 levels in Grapho game, and it goes through quite a bit of content. It does get into multisyllabic words, and then there are also, as you just saw, there are games embedded within, or segments embedded within the game that provide the opportunity for children to practice with the sounds and symbols that they've learned to put them together into multisyllabic words like that. So yes, it does cover quite a bit of content.
So if I'm a parent of a very young child, say 5-year-old, there are sections of Grapho game that would be appropriate for phonemic awareness. And what's the upper limit, do you think, in terms of grade level that parents might access in general? I know it's not specific, but in general, how high of grade level can Grapho game help with?
I would suggest really probably like the kind of like 5th or 6th grade, really up to age about 10 or 11. But again, as you point out, Dr. Russell, it's each child is different, and so just because somebody is in 5th or 6th grade, they might be reading, at a different level than their classmates, either above or behind. And so again, I've got 4 kids ages 5 to 12, and actually all of them have played this game, and even my 12-year-old likes to play it. So it's actually, even if it's not even learning a new skill, it's really good reinforcement.
Thanks, Ben. We have a few more questions. I'm going to try to get through a couple of them and then leave time at the very end for each one of our panelists and Assemblyman Carroll to have some closing remarks. So this is a toss-up question. Do morphological interventions support learners with reading and spelling?
I could take a first stab at that. I'm a great fan of building morphology into our interventions with reading and spelling. I don't think it replaces the building blocks of phonemic awareness and phonics, but what we have found through decades of research intervening with kids who really struggle with learning to read is that the more access you give them to different levels, the letter sound, letters, the spelling patterns, the beginnings and endings of words, that all of this really helps them get a handle on how the English language functions, because it can be a little tricky at times in terms of how we write it and read it. And the morphological level, particularly helpful for spelling, but also helpful for reading.
I just realized that I don't want to assume that everybody's familiar with the term morphological. What's a good, quick definition of morphological?
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that, Dr. Russell. So a morpheme, just like a phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in a word, a morpheme is the smallest unit of meaning. And there are 2 types of, when we're talking about morphemes, there are inflectional morphemes. And so an inflectional morpheme would be, like an example would be like a suffix that changes maybe the tense of a word. And then there are derivational morphemes, which have more to do with, and I can give you an example here. when you have a child getting into Latin and Greek code, which is most of what we start to see in textbooks at grade 4, they're multisyllabic words. And so if you know that if you know D means down, like if you're going to descend the stairs, or cap means head, like you wear a baseball cap, or if you decapitate somebody, this is a good one I like to use with the students, you're taking their head down. And so the inflectional morphology helps us understand the meaning of words. And so as Dr. Lovett said, morphology is really helpful. And it's also helpful, I found, for children who are English language learners or who maybe haven't had nearly the exposure to vocabulary or oral language, because it's yet another code they can learn to be able to crack open a tremendous number of multisyllabic words, especially once they get into textbooks.
Yeah, and I think we're all familiar with how powerful understanding prefixes and suffixes are in terms of understanding the context that a word is presented. And those Greek and Latin roots pay dividends in comprehension, and also, for those parents who are worried about it already, SAT scores. So any other comments on morphological interventions? For example, what is a good intervention? So we mentioned one, just to highlight it again. I know at Windward, we emphasize Greek and Latin roots and teach them specifically in terms of the morphology. Interesting, but not related to this directly, is idioms are also an interesting piece of this, where meaning can be distorted, and teaching idioms and explaining idioms directly are really important. I'll give one example. A colleague of mine was working with his son and reading a story, and the story said, and then Ben found himself in a real pickle. And all of a sudden, my colleague stopped and said, I wonder if he's thinking about somebody actually being inside of a pickle. Obviously, so he asked his son, he said, do you know what that means? And again, this is a little advertisement for Windward, but he said, we have Idiom Tuesdays. And he said, of course, I know what it means. He said, how do you know? He said, Idiom Tuesday. So teaching those, and for parents, wherever you are, when you have an idiom, explaining the idiom to a child is a great way to get them to understand it, because those are more prevalent than we realize as adults, that we just take idioms for granted. I don't know if anybody wants to expand any further, if I killed that completely.
Well, Dr. Russell, I love that example. One thing I found, I love dad jokes and that humor. But there are a lot of ways to leverage that with language and language development, and making, using puns. They're really good teaching tools, and they're good ways to add a bit of humor and levity to, so it doesn't seem like, we're kind of sitting our children down and forcing them to learn. We can have a lot of fun with this too.
So here's a really powerful and important last question for the panel. What are suggestions for parents who don't know how to read themselves or struggle to read to their children? What are some ideas for those parents?
That's a great question. There are certainly resources out there. I think, Dr. Lovett shared we didn't get to hear any of it, but the read alouds, where there's actually, Miss Lauren is the one doing the read alouds, where there are resources out there that offer access to literacy through an audio format like that, or an audio video format like that, where somebody else is actually reading out loud that popular book. And that's actually something my kids love, although, they like when I read to them myself. They actually love to hear other people read too. And so there are resources like that exist. And then, audiobooks in general are a huge resource. And we found those even, sharing those in households where there isn't somebody in the household who can, be the primary resource for that child, where, again, it's giving them access to a lot of rich oral language. And, audiobooks provide just a huge amount of a huge opportunity to really learn the aspects of, how is a narrative written, or character development, or all the things we want kids to learn when they read. you can do some of those things through an audio format as well. But I don't know if Dr. Lovett has any other resources or ideas she might want to share.
No, that was exactly what I was going to suggest. And one thing I noticed when we were first starting the resource library and we were looking around at what was being made available without cost, were that there were a number of sites offering audiobooks read aloud by actors and rock stars and people who would be of general interest. So those sites are available and books are being read aloud, and as long as the parent and the child are both enjoying it, I think it's a wonderful activity.
The other resource I was going to suggest too, I think you're exactly right, Dr. Lovett, is if you can find, in public libraries, sometimes there are just some amazing librarians. And I know we've had experience where families have been able to find, programs or opportunities through things like their public library, which again, right now with COVID is not, an easy solution, but sometimes some of these libraries have gone online as well. And are providing resources or opening access to resources. So, that's certainly another avenue you could pursue too.
And I know of a device that kind of bridges the strictly audio. For example, the Intel Reader. Ben, I know you're familiar with this as well as I am, where a text is scrolled and you can actually control the size of the font and the speed that is displayed. And as it's displayed, as the text is displayed, it's read to you. So there are a whole series of different devices that are capable of doing that. So a number of tools out there. I think in addition to Haskins, I think IDA, the International Dyslexic Association, also has a number of those kinds of resources that might help parents who struggle to read to their children and are available. So we're quickly running out of time. So I'd like to close our webinar with a few statements from our panelists. And since you were the one who organized this and initiated, Assemblyman Carroll, I'd like you to take the first shot at that.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jay, and thank you, Ben and Maureen, for this wonderful presentation and the resources that are available to all of us at the Haskins Global Literacy Hub. I do want to mention, I saw in the chat a few folks mention dyslexia and their children struggle with dyslexia. And as I believe the only dyslexic on this panel, I don't want to make any broad generalizations about dyslexia, but what I do want to say, because I do think it is a continuum disorder that affects folks differently. But what I will say is my experience and the interventions that I received that were multisensory, sequential in nature, and based in phonemic awareness were essential to me becoming a fluent and fluid reader. And I do want to underline that I'm an attorney. I've had a play I've written, produced, but I always allow people to know that I am a fluent and fluid reader and writer, because to this day, no matter how much success I have people ask me if I am a reader, if I am a writer. Your son or daughter can become fluent and fluid readers and writers. It may take longer. It may be different. I may not be the fastest reader, and I'm not the greatest speller, but I'm not atrocious at spelling either. And so the resources that these three professionals have provided us are essential to building that reading brain for all students, and all students and all children can do that. So I want to thank all of you so much for taking time out of your busy days and schedules to speak to all of us. It means so much to so many. And so really, thank you all so much for your hard work tonight.
Thank you, Bobby. That's very kind of you. We do this because we share your passion for this. Maureen, Dr. Lovett, any closing thoughts?
I just want to thank you very much, Bobby, for arranging this. It's a privilege for us to sit and meet with you and with the constituency of parents and teachers out there, because as Dr. Russell said, we all do share the same passion and the same desire and place the same value on literacy. Tonight, we tried to illustrate that there were some user-friendly resources for parents and family members, but I don't want to overlook the fact that there are also resources that we've included in the library that are very detailed and provide in-depth resources for teachers who are looking to access information on a topic like teaching vocabulary to English language learners. So we hope that the materials we've pulled together will be helpful to parents and family members working at home with their children, but also to teachers working online or working in schools with kids, and also still be relevant when school resumes.
Thanks, Maureen. Ben, Dr. Powers?
Well, thanks again, everybody, for your time and attention tonight. And again, thank you, Assemblyman Carroll. We really appreciate this opportunity. You know, at the end of the day, there are tons of things we can do with our kids, but one of the best things we can do is read with them. Model reading, reading back and forth, or if you're not comfortable reading with your child, if you're somebody who yourself struggles with reading, accessing an audiobook, whether, it's through your public library or resources like Learning Ally, which has a huge collection of audiobooks. There are just a number of ways that we can engage kids with reading, because if we can find, our kids by nature, they have a spark and an engine to learn, and they're curious by nature. And so, don't worry about, don't worry if it's got a gold seal on the book, or, if it's a Newbery Prize winner. Focus on finding something that your child or you and your child can enjoy together, and that will get you on a road to a lifetime of reading.
So I guess because I field the questions, I get the last word. And it's really simple. I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank Bobby for organizing this. I want to thank all of you for being part of it. I'd also like to make a suggestion to everybody who's in attendance. This is a resource, the Haskins Global Literacy Hub, that is frankly rare in the public arena, where you have truly world-class experts in cognitive science, in reading research, all contributing to a body of knowledge that we have translated to make accessible to parents and teachers. It seems to me to be a great sin if we don't share that knowledge. And I would ask each of you to let your friends know, let other parents know, let other teachers know that this valuable resource is there for them. It's thoroughly vetted, it's free, and it's based on real reading science. So with that, I'll say thank you, good night, and be safe.